So a little bit today, as you heard, I have been an educator for in the field of education for several years now, but I do find myself currently working at USC Shoah Foundation, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what I do, but hopefully with my expertise as to what I do around content development, I really look at how we really want to engage students. How do we make their learning, how do we make them become a part of the learning, and not just talk at them, for example, but have them become more engaged and curious about the different types of topics that you'd be introducing with the wonderful curriculum that I had mentioned and alluded to before. So today my presentation is really looking at specifically how do we design a lesson, a perfect lesson, if you will, and that really engages students. And I'll share some examples from the work that I do, and we'll hopefully have some time for breakout rooms where you'll actually be able to practice this yourself. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just give you, I invite you actually all, if you can, if you have the capacity to just drop your name. I know many people are off camera, and that's completely understandable. But if you just drop your name, or maybe just drop a note about what you are hoping to learn from today's presentation, that would be wonderful, and helps me to know and maybe touch on certain things that you're looking for and what you're looking to get out of. And we'll also have some time for questions in the end. All right. So as I mentioned, become a little familiar with USC Shoah Foundation and the work that I do. We'll go over some strategies for how you can put together a great lesson plan, and also build some confidence around building original lesson plans for yourself. So just to give you some background on my work at USC Shoah Foundation, first, if you haven't heard of us, we are an institute located on the USC campus. Our mission is to develop empathy, understanding, and respect through testimony, and specifically testimony that of genocide survivors. The picture on the right-hand side is that of Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg, filmmaker, what does he have to do with genocide? Well, that photograph that you see there is taken on the set of Schindler's List, which is the most profound, significant movie in the 90s connected to the Holocaust. If you haven't seen it, again, very profound, very emotional film, but that's really what kickstarted Holocaust education, and also kind of a revival or a renewal of genocide education interest in Holocaust studies in the 90s, but also gave him the idea to interview survivors of genocide, specifically the Holocaust from around the world. And in 2006, he partnered with USC to create a visual history archive. And so this archive has actually expanded to encompass more than just Holocaust survivor testimonies. It includes testimonies of Armenian genocide survivors, Cambodian genocide survivors, survivors of Guatemala or Rwanda, and you can see we even have in our collection current day examples from Rohingya or South Sudanese and other examples in Africa. And so the numbers here on the side, I copy pasted this from a presentation I did with Armenian teachers. So you could see that it's in Armenian, but we have 55,000 testimonies in our archive currently. But what I really want to talk about today, and just kind of as I give you some examples of what we have, our Armenian testimonies come from the Armenian Film Foundation, if you are interested and curious about that, and the Richard G. Hovhannisyan Oral History Collection. And so we do have a bit of over 1,000 testimonies connected to Armenian survivors or scholars or any other witnesses of the Armenian genocide in our collection. And they do encompass different themes like culture, faith, forced conversion, deportation, survival, memory, things like this. But what I want to also share is that on our website, we do have an educational website, and this website is eyewitness.usc.edu. I'll just drop it in, and as I speak, for those who just kind of want to take a quick look and tour of it as I speak, you're welcome to do so. But we do have, this is our, again, a flexible, friendly teacher-student page where we have all these testimonies and ready-to-use lesson plans ready to go and download for educators. You do need an account, which is free, to really just gain all of what we have available, but you can see some of our testimonies and activities that we do have available on the page. But I really want to go into the pedagogy around our work. What that means is, what is the theory or the educational practice that really informs how we construct lesson plans and make our site and our materials student-friendly and also teacher-friendly. So there's a very popular learning theory called constructivism. And this is a term and a theory that came about in the late 70s by Leon Vygotsky, who really was thinking about how we can really have students become more engaged in their learning. And this theory of constructivism, you can even hear it in the word, construct. Students are constructing their own thoughts, ideas, perceptions, and meaning from different topics by asking questions, by, again, becoming more curious. And in this way, they're more of the drivers of their learning. And they're connecting the dots, they're connecting all the different materials or keywords that you as a teacher or an educator present to them, which makes this a non-traditional sort of conservative way, moves away from this conservative idea of the teacher is meant to just be sort of the sage on a stage, if you will, which kind of means just the one who talks to the students, but doesn't really involve them in their learning. And so with that, constructivism allows students to, again, ask questions and become curious, and those questions are what make the learning come alive. If you do have any questions, please let me know. And I do see Sevog says, I believe this testimony was featured on 60 Minutes. Yes, what you did see is our dimensions and testimony on 60 Minutes, which is, and if we do have time in the end, I can show you, but it is a sort of AI and technology where you can actually ask a survivor a question and he will respond back to you. And this is through our dimensions and testimony technology.
There are a few more questions. Laura Lejean Klein, like to learn new technique to keep students interested. Tammy from St. Alcott would like to learn strategies for engaging all students in mixed age class, 5 to teens. Mm-hmm. Here, I'd like to learn how to engage and involve students during lessons. From Houston, we have St. Gabriel Armenian Church, how to keep kids engaged and involved to learn Armenian. And Sevak has a question, how do we get kids to talk and ask questions in class? This is a great question. I'd like to see more conversation between kids, in addition to what the teacher has to share on any given Sunday. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Those are great, and we can carve some time before maybe we go into breakouts to maybe discuss what are some examples of what you're actually seeing, right? Just like, and then kind of just have an opportunity to just discuss, and I could share my perspective and thoughts, but also like fellow peers to also share their thoughts together, if that can also be informative and helpful. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and just skip through this. We do have a page on our site dedicated to the Armenian genocide, where we do have handouts, materials, testimony, maps, photographs that educators can download and use in their classroom. But I'm going to go ahead and essentially share what I call the perfect lesson plan. And what this is follows a particular framework that we use for our lessons, and it's called the 4C framework. So just going to pull it up for a moment and take a pause and kind of take any questions that you might have, or some ahas or connections that you have, things that you're already doing that may connect to this framework, or things that surprise you about this framework, right after I kind of go over it and explain the different parts and components of it. So the 4C framework essentially means that there are 4 C's a part of a lesson plan. The first C is consider. At this consider, we can call them stages or sections. At this consider stage, what we really are looking for students to really gain is background knowledge about a particular topic. So if we have a particular topic at hand, take, let's say, for example, the concept of courage. Can you think of examples of courage that are in the Bible? Are there any examples of, demonstrations of courage? Well, before the students really look at those particular examples, they might need to know, we take a step back, what is courage? How have they seen courage in their life before? What does courage mean to them? Or what do they think when they think of this word courage? Even at 5 years old, they might even be able to answer that question because they may have heard that word or term before. Or you can give a little bit more detail or more examples to have them answer the question of what is courage. So essentially, consider is that, or here in Armenian, we have Nagadiarnel, really to build that background knowledge on a topic, to have them kind of safely enter a lesson and have their background knowledge also understood. Because what if a student didn't know what courage was or had a misunderstanding of this term courage, and we didn't check that in the beginning? Then you have a whole lesson where the student may be lost, right, and not understanding what this word courage is. So consider is that opportunity to consider a topic and what it means and what it's about. Collect is this, the next section where students are gathering new information or new key vocabulary that can add to their understanding of the topic. So what are some examples or key words that might be associated with courage? So this is what we want to introduce to students now to help them really develop that understanding. So here we might bring in a historic figure who embodies courage. So who can we think of that embodies courage? What historic religious figure possibly can we pull in? I can think of several, very many, right? And so with that, collect is they're gathering new pieces of information. Construct is the next stage where they're applying their learning through some type of activity. Here, for maybe the older students, you might want to have them engage in a discussion where they're summarizing key points from what they've learned, or maybe they're writing a reflection based on what they have learned in the collect section or the consider section. Based on what you have learned from, for example, Moses, what do you now understand about courage? So kind of building those connections together. And then at that last stage, communicate. This is where students present or share what they have learned with each other. This could look like small group discussions or a whole group discussion or a presentation that they can give. So I'm just going to take a pause and a stop. And also at that end, communicate. This is also very collaborative. It's meant for students to have learned from one another, not only just from the educator. So I'm just going to take a pause for just 5 minutes and just kind of stop sharing my screen and allow you all to kind of share maybe what surprised you about this 4C framework, or any connections that you've made with lessons you've already done or created before. So please, I invite you to write in the chat or come off mute and share what you're thinking about the 4C framework before I give you a particular example.
Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, this is Jill Panosian. I'm with St. Gregory Pasadena Church.
Hi there.
Hi. Hi, everybody on the call who knows me. I've been teaching Sunday school for about 5 years. I have 2 elementary school daughters. I'm not a credentialed teacher, but I love teaching Sunday school. And I was really actually surprised at your format regarding children learning from each other. I know that in our Sunday school, and as well as other Sunday schools that that I'll attend in the Central Valley, you know, where my hometown is, it's imperative that the teachers are the guides to educate the kids, because children are children and they're there to learn. And of course, we want to interact with them. And of course, we want to be their guides and inspire them to, you know, to get creative in their projects. Something that we found useful at St. Gregory, as well as different Sunday schools, again, is that when we deliver the lesson as teachers, we do establish that the teacher is the expert authority figure who really does have the knowledge. And then we incorporate the craft, and that is the participation for the children to get it into their minds and their hearts and their bodies and really wrap their heads around what we were, quote unquote, talking at them. But I do just want to reinforce that for parents and teachers, the teacher and the parent and the adults are in fact the authority expert figure, because if we depend on children to teach themselves, they're not going to learn anything. But I appreciate your insight a lot.
And I appreciate you bringing in your thought on what I mentioned. And I definitely don't want to make what I said sound like the teacher is completely not an authority, or doesn't know, or is not an expert, because that is essential, right? You do need to be a guide and guide their learning. You do need to provide those tools, and that only comes, and resources, and that only comes from the expert, the educator. And for sure, right, as you're navigating and allowing students to create meaning and asking questions, the only way kind of really like we want them to learn from each other is maybe they have an example or an idea of courage, right? And they want to bring that and share that with the group. And then someone else says, yes, I can relate to that, or so that kind of builds on building on each other's comments is kind of what I mean by learning from each other. It's just being able to have more perspective. Thank you for bringing that in, Jill.
Am I on mute, Sedda?
No, I can hear you.
Hear me okay? I don't want to go in that chat room because I'm not real good at this and I don't want to lose connection. But I like the framework, and you went very quickly over the website of the educational part of that of SHOA, where you have lesson plans all ready to print. I would love that website again. And I was going to say the only part of the lesson plan that is difficult for me as a teacher are the activities, the thing at the end to play with or to pull them in. Or so if anything, I would like more of those activities to try things up. Like David and Goliath, we did play. I got them slingshots and we played with those, and that brought it all home real good. But the craft part of it, I do the older students. So the craft is always a little hard for me.
Thank you.
But I would like that website again. Yes.
And I'll definitely share links and with Vahe. And Vahe, if you don't mind sharing that with the group after the presentation, after today, that would be great. I think we can get those resources to you for sure.
Yeah, any links that you find appropriate you want to share, you can leave it in the chat. And after we're done with the meeting, we'll have the video available of the presentation, of the discussion, as well as all the links that will be posted here in the chat, they will be available both on our website, the CEC website, and the Facebook page.
Thank you. Is there anything else that anybody would like to say about the framework before we move forward? And I share an actual example of one of the lessons we have on the website. So Cecilia, I'll give one example directly from a lesson we've got. And hopefully that'll translate to when we'll go into breakout rooms and kind of talk about some current lessons that you have and how that could fit into the framework.
We have a few more comments here. If you want, I can read them.
Sure.
Sunday school teacher, 5, 6, 7 years old, San Francisco, I guess, trying to compile sound timeline coinciding with lessons for the kids, which I and other teachers can go to year. I guess this is part of the questions that were coming up. Sedda, thank you for this clear framework. I'm excited to see this fundamental collaborative framework. I think this process helps the teacher guide the process of learning in ways that are more relevant for youth. Another one, I work at a Montessori school. We have children with mixed grade classes so the kids can learn from each other and older kids become models for the other children. For every lesson we have a 3-part activity involving physical activity for each lesson. And the last one is, if students feel like they can contribute and connect to the content and each other by sharing experiences, they will be more engaged in the lessons and able to process more effectively.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. And hopefully, of course, again, you may already be having, apply your own skills, your own strategies, but this kind of framework and what I'm introducing to you is just an idea. It's just a strategy that you can consider bringing in just to only add on or merge with what you're already doing. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of continue now with an example that I'd like to share with you all on one of the lessons that we have on our site. And this one in particular is called SIROUN, Finding Courage. And this actually is based on a virtual reality experience called SIROUN, which was actually created the same time that the movie The Promise was made, and it was actually filmed on the set of the Promise film. And so this lesson really brings in that film, but also testimony of genocide survivors together. I'm just going to go and onto the website to first give you some idea of where, here we go. Okay. So just to share the link to the website here, drop that in. When you're on our page, you would go to educator resources. And you would find our Armenian genocide page. This is just an example of how to get to the page. No pressure to follow along, just showing you. Here's our genocide education page. And you can see we've got our resources. We've got actually resources connected to the Promise film as well. We do have clips of testimony here. These are 30-second, 1-minute videos from survivors that talk about various different topics. And we also have our activities. So just to click on the activity, SIROUN Finding Courage, I'm going to just drop in the link for you all. This is directly to the lesson. So this lesson brings in the 4C framework and has it all prepared in a particular sort of ready to use lesson plan. So as you can see, there's a description. We bring in standards. Now, of course, I know it's Sunday school and you may not be thinking about standards like students have in a regular school curriculum, like Common Core standards, for example, but I'll definitely share a link to standards for English language arts, like read the text closely to determine what it says. So these kind of things that you may want to use as a reference or a guide that could help enhance student foundational knowledge, or what are those key learnings that you want to make sure students you're considering in your lesson. So just as a resource, something to have. So in this lesson, students will identify courage, analyze primary and secondary sources to reflect on the impact of courageous acts. They'll synthesize or bring in together an analysis of these different sources to write a reflection on how primary and secondary sources, am I sharing my screen? Yes, okay. Can help students recognize the importance of courage. So every lesson, of course, we have a learning game, and I know that in some examples of lessons that Vahe has shared with me, you also have objectives that are part of the procedure. So this is similar. Now, here's my consider section. I'm not going to go through reading everything, but just to give you an idea, what is this consider section about? It's really having students explore this concept of courage, and before they start or before they watch the film, this key essential question is introduced. How can learning about the past with primary and secondary sources help us recognize the impact of courage and courageous acts when standing up against hate? What does courage mean to you? Where does courage come from? What is the most courageous act you've done or witnessed? Why do you think it was courageous, or why do you think the individual moved into action? So these are like kind of introductory questions before we really go in and unpack with the key example here with our film and our movie. So then we'd go into the movie, we show that, and then we have students reflect on how courage plays a role in this particular film and what the film helps them understand about this key concept. Moving into collect, this is where students are really looking at those testimonies and pulling more examples of how they notice courage in the particular testimonies. And then they reflect on what they've learned. Construct, it's more of an expanded reflection where students are asked to really share and think about what they learned about courage and the impacts of courageous acts, and now to really answer that essential question. And communicate is that essentially, here you can see, it's just a discussion where students share their reflection of what surprised them from what they saw in the film or the testimonies that they heard. It's a very simple kind of, you move through these different stages here, or these different C's, to end up with students really bringing back what they have learned. Now I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. And so how does what you just saw, that lesson, come to life? We use a particular template, sort of a Word document, where we really break down what is the lesson title, the subject, the topic, how long are we thinking this lesson is going to take, what is the description, and kind of breaking down the particular kind of bullet pointing what we need to do in each of the C's. So I'm going to go ahead and so if you're all familiar with this lesson on Moses and the 10 Commandments, thinking about how you can take the lessons that you have and sort of merging that into this framework. How do you notice what do you notice on the particular lesson that you have that kind of connects to these different 4 C's? So if you're looking at, oh, this is definitely something that students really consider, right? It's gathering their thoughts, initial thoughts on the topic. This is an example of where students are gathering new information. So that's something that they would do and collect. So it's really just thinking about, really just rethinking or being more conscious of what you have in front of you as a lesson and how you can see it in the 4C framework. So I'm just going to stop sharing now. And before we go in, just thinking of how you all had already mentioned, you brought up some examples of things that you'd like to see happen in the class, with your students, like having them ask more questions. So again, I'll just kind of stop here as a checkpoint and see, are there any connections or thoughts or questions you'd like to have, opening it up as a discussion before maybe we go into breakout rooms and for a few moments to just kind of talk to our age group fellow teachers. Any questions anyone has or connections anybody would like to make?
Sedda, this is Laura from Boston, from Watertown. Thank
Hi
you very
there.
much. This is a fabulous framework. I know one thing personally, I feel like that I think we do a lot, and having taught in Sunday school for 2 decades, is we don't even start by considering but just by helping them access their own thinking, their own understanding, and setting the stage that way. So I really appreciate that that's emphasized first. But the whole 4C framework is, I'm eager to hear how you would encourage us to help other teachers learn it and use it in a simple way. But I really appreciate that it starts that way, because I think that makes it so relevant for students so they know that we care about what they think first. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Laura. And good to see you all the way from Watertown, Court.